Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. I'm Illeagle 86. I'm here as always with my very good friends Techtic and Nerdbomber, fighting off the lack of daylight. That's been the story of the past week for me. I feel like it probably has been for you guys too. I always forget how tired it makes me.
My sleep schedule, I feel like, has been more in line with the world because my body feels like I'm going to bed later and also like I'm waking up later. So like on this weekend and last weekend, I've been waking up at like 9:30. Typically, like I'm groggy at 9:30, but I'm like waking up naturally at 9:30 well rested. And it's great because my body's like, yo, it's like 10:30. You slept in. Good for you.
I think what you need is to live closer to the equator. I think you just need more sunshine. When the sun comes up, you're like, okay, this is time.
I don't know if that's it because I'm also feeling tired at a time when everyone else now feels like it's appropriate to go to bed. Like I'm getting tired at like 11:30, 12 o'clock because in my brain still it's like, oh, it's 12:30, 1 o'clock. This is your time. And I'm like, yes, this is my time.
When did you fall asleep last night? Personal question. Last night was a Saturday.
Last night we were watching a movie and like had a later night. So we went to bed around like 2.
Woof.
But that was just because we were up. Like we watched a movie, we played a little bit of Rocket League, like it was the weekend. But like throughout the week, I've been going to bed closer to like 11:30, which is different for me. Normally, I can't even think about going to sleep until midnight because I just will lay there and not sleep.
Last night, I pulled out all the stops and was like, I'm staying up. And I believe I fell asleep at 11:45. Like I just can't. I can't.
Are you okay? I feel like you have like some sort of sleepy syndrome where you're just sleepy.
I think that's possible. Maybe I have like a thyroid disorder or something. I have no idea, but it's
like,
fine.
During the week, don't you go to bed like at like 9:30, 10 o'clock? Isn't that your typical call time?
I like the phrase call time. Typically, I'm getting into bed or angling to get into bed around 10. Typically, I'm putting my phone down and going to sleep around 10:30, 10:45, and I'm getting up at like 6:30. So
how many hours of sleep? That's 8 hours. Wow.
I got a tight 8.
It feels
like
longer
like what the doctors recommend. That's like
he's gonna live longer than you.
Conventional wisdom. Yeah, I mean I'm gonna live longer, but I don't know if I'm gonna like it. Yeah, no. Last night I got into bed at like 10:30. Yeah, I did that on purpose. And I put on a movie called Remember the Titans because I was like, I want to watch a movie that I've seen already and isn't gonna surprise me and it's gonna be like generally good vibes. And at 11:45, the movie obviously wasn't over. And it was like entering the pivotal point of the movie. And I was just like, I cannot stay awake anymore. So I fell asleep with it on. And I'm not proud of that, to be honest with you. But it happened. And, I know how Remember the Titans ends. I know the gist. Pretty good movie, though. It kind of holds up. I don't know if you guys have watched. This isn't a What Are You Up To Wednesday. I just like kind of happened to turn it on. But it was like, yeah, it was good. It was fun. About as fun as a movie with that subject matter.
Do you remember them or no?
I didn't remember them, but then I turned the movie on, and probably like 5 minutes in, I was like,
oh, yeah, that's the Titans.
Yeah. So that was a good experience for me. We're going to be talking about a couple of movies today. Or actually, I don't know if this first thing is a TV show or a movie. You guys will be able to tell me because it's much more in your lane than mine. But we're going to be talking about Inside Out 2. Got a trailer for that. Generally
that's
speaking,
definitely a movie.
That's definitely a movie. The Avatar: The Last Airbender, I would assume it's a show.
Yes, it is.
Okay. We're going to talk about that too. Generally speaking, as kind of an over for all these topics, the SAG-AFTRA strike ended last week, and I don't know if it was just a coincidence, but it feels like the strike ended, and then Hollywood at large was like, here's a billion things and trailers, and like actors can now promote things again. So like, I feel like there was a new Ghostbusters trailer that we're like not talking about, and that was, I don't know if it was an active choice that we made, but it just didn't get picked this week, and that was another thing. There's just, I feel like there's a lot of things happening right now.
Well, there was even an
Hollywood
entire
is, quote unquote, back
Netflix Geek Week with a bunch of trailers and stuff that just didn't make the cut.
Yeah, Damsel. Did you guys watch the trailer for Damsel?
We did watch that.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about. Well, maybe we can talk about it now for like a minute.
She didn't look too distressed, I will say.
She seemed like she had things under control for most of it, but there were parts where I would say she was in distress, but the whole point is that she's not, right? That's like, it's like a subversion kind of thing.
I actually really liked the concept of like all of these, at least this is what it seemed to be implying from the trailer, that like they actually sacrifice damsels so that like the kingdom can save them and feel good about themselves or something like that. And she's just like, nah, I'm going to be a badass and save myself.
See, it's funny watching that trailer.
It made me feel like they sacrificed her on purpose.
See, I don't know if that's what I thought it was more so it's like you have to go here and fight all these things. I didn't take it as you have to go here and get sacrificed.
Yeah,
maybe that is what it was.
I got a Wonder Woman vibe where if you know how the Amazonians, they're all like, we need to rise to the challenge and go through these trials and tribulations to come out better on the other side. That's the vibe that I got.
I got the vibe that Robin Wright, who incidentally was also in Wonder Woman, like Robin Wright and Angela Bassett, I feel like they went through the same stuff as Millie Bobby Brown is now going through, right? I don't know. It was one of those trailers where like it was in some sense kind of a mishmash of a lot of footage that like the story itself was not made clear. I don't know if it's like a typical thing where like that was a quote unquote teaser trailer and the quote unquote theatrical trailer is going to like tell us more.
All right, so I'm doing some wiki research. There are a total of 2 sentences to describe the premise. A dutiful damsel agrees to marry a handsome prince, only to discover it was all a trap. The royal family recruited her as a sacrifice to repay an ancient debt. She is then thrown into a cave with a fire-breathing dragon, having to solely rely on her wits and will to survive.
That sounds sacrificey,
situation. I'd say that it used the word sacrifice. That's interesting. I guess I took away something different from the trailer, but that's to my detriment, I suppose. Anyways, like you said, that was part of a Geeked Week from Netflix, that there were other things in there. But the thing that we have chosen to discuss is Avatar: The Last Airbender. You guys know Avatar. Long-running animated series. Very bad M. Night. Have you guys ever watched the M. Night movie? Because I know you guys are big Avatar fans.
I heard it was a bane. Yeah, I heard it was just like a blight, I guess, on the Avatar IP. So I did not watch that because why would I do that to myself?
Came out in, well, according to Google, 2010, but I don't know if that's actually true. I guess it might be. I think it's right off the bat, I will say, I think it's very bold of Netflix to try again. Like, I guess, I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about the M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, were the movie's problems execution-based problems, or were they problems with translating it from, an animated format to a live-action format? Maybe you guys can speak more to that, but like, we've seen a lot of things, maybe not so much recently, but a lot of things try to make that transition and fail, right? Like, do you know how One Piece is doing? Is it doing okay?
It's doing well, yeah.
It got renewed for a second season, I believe.
It's
okay.
Yeah, it's being well received.
Because it came out and I stopped hearing about it, but that was probably, Netflix at this point, I think, knows better than to suggest it to me to like watch it. So it just didn't. And I just kind of like, it fades into the nether for me. And I don't know anything about it. But, okay, good for One Piece. Yeah, obviously Netflix made a huge investment in that. They're making what looks like a very sizable investment in Avatar: The Last Airbender. So we got a trailer for this, minute and a half, 2-minute trailer from what I remember. And I know that it said February 22nd, I believe, of next year is when some number of episodes drop. I don't know if they're dropping the whole first season at once. We tend to not know with stuff like this. I think Netflix tends to drop.
Yeah, Netflix usually does like entire season drops at a time.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the format, right? Because their reality stuff, they will often do chunks of like 3 or 4 episodes over a course of several weeks. But with full-fledged fictional series like this, I'm guessing they're going to drop an entire season at once. So again, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. You guys are the experts on Avatar: The Last Airbender. What did you see that excited you? What did you see that concerned you, if anything, in what we saw?
So for me, like one of the big reasons that the M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong version of the adaptation didn't work was because he took too many creative liberties and changed too many things from the original base material. And I think what people who are looking for a live action remake of the show want to see is basically a faithful adaptation. The show, the animated series at least, did really well for a reason. It had great storytelling, great character development, wonderful character arcs and story arcs, and the way that things and details all tied together, like there was just a lot of love and attention to detail put into the creation of the original animated series. And I think that's what people want to see, that basically just recreated with live action actors. And at least from this trailer, it seems like that's what Netflix is going to do. They're not going to try to change the story. They're not going to, one of the big things is condense a 4-season show into an hour-and-a-half movie. They're actually going to do it justice and give, in the series format, this show the time and care that the storyline deserves. And even like a lot of the casting, I know there were some internet discourse about the casting, but I think everything cohesively in this trailer seemed like they did a really good job, made sure that it carried the spirit and intention of the original animated show. And I was really excited to see Appa, both the big Flying Bison and Appa from Kim's Convenience.
Okay, so that's a bison. It looks like a dog to me. I was getting like Never-Ending Story vibes again, having basically no exposure to Avatar.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. I mean, my uneducated take on this. We've talked a lot about Netflix and what lane Netflix should be in, what lanes, plural, I guess they should be in. We've talked a lot about these big budget movies they make that kind of go nowhere. The Killer came out this past weekend. I have not watched it yet, but that may be the latest example of that. With series, right, it's not so much the same thing. Like, obviously, Stranger Things is one of their single most successful properties. One Piece, as you said, just got renewed for season 2. I'm sure there are other examples of, very big budget, very high production value series that they've made that have been very successful. I look at this and I see a very, very big bet that it will work.
I don't think it's a bet. I think going with Nerdbomber said, I think if you stay true to the story, which is what it appears they're doing, it's going to do well. The problem that I did see was there's a lot of there's Appa, there's Momo, there's the fish spirits, there's all of these larger than life creations and creatures that are going to have to be CGI. And then in the trailer, what we saw was very rough looking CGI. They need to divert those action movie film funds into improving and honing the CGI, because having that look very janky, we don't want an Avengers Third Eye situation with, you remember how Doctor Strange looked like someone Crayola'd a third eye on us? We don't want that. We can't afford to have that in this. And we don't want something as silly as just taking the time to really hone the craft to undersell the value that this story has.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable concern. I mean, I think in general, and again, Stranger Things being an exception, like CGI in TV tends to be less good. And I don't know, is it just because there's potentially more volume of things to be CGI than in an hour and a half movie? If you have like a 10 episode series that has a lot of things that need to be CGI'd, is it just that they're operating on a similar schedule to a movie, but they have more to do? I don't, VFX artists who listen to this podcast, reach out to us and tell us. But like, I think generally speaking, that tends to be an affliction of series relative to movies.
So I go back to movie making and filmmaking and creating as a whole, and what we've done with CGI as a crutch, right? You go back 10 years, they had CGI, but they also had a lot of real props so that it pulled some of the load away from the CGI and made it a balance of the two to make it work and make it a reasonable, I guess, budget. If they did something like that, it might offload some of the heavy lifting. There's a lot of, Appa's in the background. Appa's, not super close where you can get away with a prop. It doesn't need to be him on the forefront, super animated. So while he was a good part of the story, he's not. There's a whole season where he's away. He gets kidnapped.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. And there's incidentally, outside of discussion about this show, I've seen a lot of discourse on Twitter lately about man, CGI used to be so good. In particular, I see Pirates of the Caribbean thrown around a lot as when early 2000s CGI peaked in quality and, as you said, it wasn't being used. The technology had, fully evolved into what it could be. So it was technologically, it was where it needed to be, but it wasn't yet being used as a crutch. They were still combining CGI with physical sets. Now we've moved on to things like the quote unquote volume that we hear about all the time in Star Wars shows. They've moved on to things where if they don't know how to make something practically, they just CGI it, right? And that drains a lot of movie magic that could otherwise exist from something, maybe something like Avatar: The Last Airbender. But I think it's interesting. I don't know how we get back to, this is a larger point, but I don't know how we get back to quote unquote good CGI. And again, this is not necessarily me crapping on VFX artists. It's more so me crapping on VFX artists being horribly overworked and directors and producers probably making unreasonable demands about what it can and should do, right? So I think it's a very good, broader point to bring up with respect to this show. But, I do think that going back to The Last Airbender, this is something that the animated series is on Netflix, right? And has been for a while. Didn't you guys watch it on Netflix?
I think it might have moved over to Peacock, but it was on Netflix at one point, and now it is somewhere else, maybe Paramount. It's on a streaming service. You can watch it somewhere.
It's a good example of something that, it has an existing fan base. The show was on for 4 seasons, so fans probably feel like they would like to get more out of the IP. And this may be a way for Netflix to deliver that and to immediately pick up an existing fan base without having to do a whole lot of work.
Well, I think the cool thing, I think this could bring in
marketed much,
like new people as well, because one of the things, and I even fell into this trap for a while, and Techtic calls me on this all the time.
All the time.
I don't always love animated stuff. It like in terms of like serious series, I have a lot of issues. Sometimes like they just feel a little bit too janky or over the top when they're animated because, you're not confined to the limits of the real world. So sometimes
I feel the same way. I still feel that way.
Cartoons can feel, and like animated stuff can just feel a little extra. And one of the things that Avatar did really well, and people who don't like animated shows won't give it a chance just on the merit of it being animated, is it is a very grounded show. For all of the fantastical elements in the show and the story, it is a very grounded show. You never really, like, there is some humor built in. Obviously, it started on Nickelodeon. It was intended for kids and a mixed audience. But overall, it is a very grounded show. And I think, drawing it into an real life action format might bring more people in, because I do think there is a really rich story, a really rich world here. And there's a reason why everybody who ends up watching the show, even if they're not super sold on animated format to begin with for serious storytelling, like they end up falling in love with it, myself included. So if more people can be exposed to this story and this world in its live action format, I'm super excited because, like I said, it's a very rich world, rich story, great characters.
I have a holistic PSA. If you want to watch cartoons that have like profound writing, really the early 2000s, late 90s to like 2010 window of cartoon animators and like cartoon story writers were on just some other level. They were really trying to be profound. I mean, they're X-Men, Batman, Teen Titans, Avatar, all of these shows. Just check those out.
They were trying to elevate the medium, and we're going to talk about Inside Out 2 after this. And like, I really do think, at least for American audiences, I think Pixar did a lot for adults watching animated content, cartoons, whatever you want to call it. Like, I think probably a lot of animators saw what Pixar had done and decided, there's room for adult viewers in this medium. Like I think you can say the same thing about like all the animated cartoons that are explicitly for adults. Like, I mean, Rick and Morty, I would say, is an adult-centered show, and like lots of stuff on Adult Swim, same sort of thing. Like, animation, I think, did experience a boon around the time you're describing of like, hey, we can bring in adult viewers, and cartoons can take on quote unquote mature themes with some finesse. So I totally agree. I also like, kind of to wrap up on The Last Airbender too, like when you say live action show that has fantasy / fantastical elements, but is really focused on, inter-character dynamics and good storytelling and strong characters. Like, I think Game of Thrones, like, I'm not necessarily making that direct comparison. I don't think it's an apt comparison necessarily to make, if only because Game of Thrones also had like crazy adult themes. But I think on that merit alone, this is a potentially winning formula. It's drawing from strong source material, and I think it has a very good shot.
If people can get over the fact that the main characters are all young, I think a lot of people, obviously, like you said, it's not the same vibe of Game of Thrones, but I feel like for new viewers who they don't have a history with the show, they don't know what it's about, if they can get over that hurdle that the main cast is very young, I feel like this could be a cultural like zeitgeist sort of deal.
I definitely agree. I think that's a major roadblock. I mean, how old even is the main character?
I mean, technically very old, but no.
Well, okay.
In the animated show, he's what, like 8 or something like that? Techtic?
I thought it was 9, but yeah, technically he's 109.
It puts things into a weird zone. You're right. We're like, it's definitely not trying to be a show for kids, but the main character is a kid. Like, how many things can you think of that are successful that kind of follow that formula?
Stranger Things.
I think it's
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things is one of the few. Yeah.
And even like Game of Thrones did to a degree. If you look at some of the characters, especially like in the very beginning, like they were
in the books, they're super young.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Arya Stark is like 9 or something. I think it's really around the same age when the first book happens. So yeah, you can again go back to that to see how it can be done successfully. But again, I'm not saying The Last Airbender should try and do what Game of Thrones did or try to be Game of Thrones. I just think it's in some senses in similar territory. So again, February 22nd, 2024, that will come out on Netflix. Potentially a whole season will drop at once. So I don't know, set your calendars. Let's talk about Inside Out 2. I mentioned that a couple minutes ago, I mentioned we were going to be talking about it, and we got a trailer for this. This one was particularly short, about a minute and a half long. For the most part, we heard a lot of the same music, we saw a lot of the same characters. The real touch point here to be discussed, and kind of the thing that's being discussed on the internet right now, is the introduction of a new emotion, anxiety, voiced by Maya Hawke. I think I did read at some point there are going to be a couple of other new emotions, but I know that anxiety is kind of the headliner, and for good reason. I as someone who has been off the Pixar train for a while, the past few Pixar movies I haven't even watched. The last one I watched, I think, was Soul, and it was fine, but it didn't knock my socks off. I'm going to be getting back on the train for Inside Out too. Both because Inside Out is one of my favorite Pixar movies. It's maybe number one. It's definitely top 3, but also because I know a thing or two about anxiety. And I think that choice is extremely astute by Pixar. I think you're going to get a lot of viewers like me who are oh man, I want to see what Pixar has to say about anxiety. Inside Out had so many profound things to say about emotions and how we experience emotions, especially when we're young. Even at the age I was at,
Soul?
I didn't like Soul.
Interesting. Okay.
I shouldn't say I didn't like it, but it was not nearly as good. It is definitely on the lower end of my Pixar rankings if those were to exist. But I just I think Inside Out had a lot of profound things to say. I think it did a very good job saying them. And I would like to think that if they're making an Inside Out 2, it's because they have more to say. And specifically, they have more to say about the role of anxiety in how we experience emotions, what the strength of those emotions are, how they can come out of nowhere. There's a lot of meat on this bone.
I think anxiety is just the trailer to get you interested like it's doing right now. I think what they're really trying to show you is as we age, we become more complex. We're not just happy, sad, depressed, envious, whatever.
No doubt.
We become this I think it's going to ultimately wrap up with basically a community size worth of emotions all working together to bring you this complicated, beautiful person.
Well, yeah, and the end of the first movie essentially led to that message too. Spoiler alert, but the message of the first movie was that these emotions are not, they're not diametrically opposed. You can experience moments that are both happy and sad, and they can become core memories for you, and that's important. And there's a spectrum of emotion. That was, if I were to try to summarize what the quote unquote message of the first movie was, that's what I would say it is. For all I know, this movie may say the same thing in a different way, but I think with more emotions to do so, it has a really, really good chance to do that in a way that's even more meaningful.
What I find interesting is the introduction of anxiety as a separate emotion, because in a way, and again, as someone who has anxiety, and they did kind of maybe address this by anxiety kind of referring to themselves as we, but anxiety is nothing more than a mixture of all of the individual emotions that already existed within that universe. So I'm curious to see, especially because they made a point in the first movie where you see inside the parent's head and they have the same set of emotions, more or less. And so I'm curious to see how they're going to pivot and show oh, now you have this conglomeration of basically all of you guys as one emotion. I'm also, to play devil's advocate, so Inside Out was not one of my favorite Pixar movies. I thought that it was a little bit too intentional, trying to, play on your heartstrings and get you to feel sad. And it kind of was a little bit too overt. One of the things that I really enjoyed about earlier Pixar movies is how they had very important adult themes, but it was a little bit more subversive. It wasn't knocking you over the head with, hey, you're going to be sad and it's okay to be sad, which is kind of what Inside Out I felt did a little bit. And I'm a little bit worried that, calling out anxiety, it's going to be a little bit too knocking me over the head with, hey, anxiety is here and that is okay. And I'm a little not as excited about this one for that reason, just because I know a lot of people love Inside Out, and it was not a bad movie by any means. It's just not one of my favorites because I prefer my themes to be a little subversive, and I'm just worried that it's going to be too in my face. And I don't know if I'm even going to love that, because as someone who does experience anxiety on a day-to-day, I feel like I don't need that. I know the message. It's not good.
It's a perfectly reasonable, I think that's a really strong take on what the first movie did, and what it was trying to do is it is not subtextual at all. But in other ways, and I think it's just what kind of scratches the itch for me. I would also say that I think maybe my favorite Pixar movie, which is Up, that movie is also not very subtextual. It's just like, we're going to make you feel sad and we're going to do it really well. And
but I feel like
oh,
Up,
5 minutes in, the wife died. Oh, it's so sad. Like, it's not.
Up was really good in that I don't think it did necessarily hit you that much in the face. I think it showed the character's journey and growth. And I felt like the difference between Up and Inside Out is that, you know, the man in question doesn't realize that he has to evolve, and it takes this journey to evolve. Whereas I feel like in Inside Out, it was just a little, like I said, it wasn't as nuanced.
Joy certainly evolves throughout Inside Out to understand the importance of sadness in Riley's life. Like, I think there's a similar path of character evolution, but I do get your point where, like, I think just because Inside Out is a movie where the characters are emotions, they can talk about emotion and they can express emotional concepts to the audience in a way that's significantly more frank and just bare bones. And like, yeah, there's not a whole lot of subtext to it ever. And so if you don't, if you're not into that sort of thing, then I think that's perfectly reasonable. And yeah, if you weren't into that, you probably won't be into Inside Out 2 either. And I do agree with you that I think there is some potential. I don't think the first movie did this, but like, I think especially talking about anxiety, which is like a burgeoning mental health disorder that we're like all becoming more and more aware of by the day. Like, you know, in the 90s, anxiety barely existed, and now it's like, you know, culturally pervasive. I think they have an opportunity to get preachy about it, which I would like for them to not do. So I can understand that reticence as well. I guess my response to all of your complaints is that they're very reasonable. I don't know what to tell you. I'm going to see it. Like,
I'm not
I think
trying
I'm really
to
going to
prevent
like
you
it too.
from seeing it. It's more like just presenting an alternative viewpoint.
Yeah, which I definitely appreciate, because it's. I think I'm just so like that. I'll never forget the first time I saw that movie. Just be like, and these things are so situational, right? Like, I may have seen the first one after I'd had a bad day or something, and it just like really hit me hard and in the right way. And maybe the second one won't, even though it's going to be a very similar movie. So I just think if I'm going to get on the back on the Pixar train, it's probably going to be with a movie like this. So I do intend to see it. I don't know. This will probably be a Disney Plus for me. I don't think I'm going to go to the theater to see it. If only because one time, mini story, I saw Toy Story 4 by myself. This was back when I had AMC Plus or whatever. Shout out to AMC. And I went to a Sunday matinee, and I was like sitting by myself and just surrounded by children. And it was not a good feeling.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
I recommend it.
Embrace your inner child.
There's nothing wrong with it, but like, I don't know. It wasn't my favorite movie going experience. I could tell you that much. So yeah, I'll probably watch this on Disney Plus.
Truthfully, and not to like go into an offshoot here, but don't get me wrong, I do like the theater experience, and like, we haven't really gone to theaters, but we've more so gone to like drive-ins lately. But there is something to be said, and this is something that I feel like COVID really did for me. I do appreciate watching movie premieres at home. Like, I like to see sometimes the first time I watch a movie, I kind of like being at home. I can pause and go to the bathroom and not worry about missing anything. And I can like make my own snacks and have a drink.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I don't agree, but I also like, I don't have a good argument against that level of comfort. Like, I know for a fact my wife would agree with you. I just like,
it definitely depends on the movie. Like, there are some movies, like I said, I do prefer seeing on the big screen, like the new TMNT. I really enjoyed, you know, granted, that was a drive-in experience, but it's the same deal. Like, I do appreciate that. But for smaller movies, I do like the option to not have to go to a movie theater to watch them.
Well, I think you could make an argument too that like, and you know, we're recording this podcast on the weekend that the Marvels just came out, and like, by all accounts is tanking. Like, I feel
so bad for that movie because I don't know if it's like, I haven't read any reviews or anything.
Yeah, I think it's all just Marvel fatigue.
Yeah, and like, I don't know if anybody gave them a chance.
Any Marvel movie that comes out now is going to be facing an extreme uphill battle, and it's been that way for the past, I don't know, however many months. I agree totally. I don't know that it's the movie itself's fault. It's just like, the point I was trying to make is that like, I think back in the 2010s when those movies were really hot, like, those were movies that, I don't want to say demanded a theater experience, but like, it was so much better. Like, I saw Age of Ultron in theaters, and I'm so glad that I did. I saw Winter Soldier in theaters. I'm so glad that I did. I think it literally, because that franchise was so successful, it kind of souped up movie theaters in the eyes of average American audiences. And like, the theater experience was a lot more important back then than it is now. Like, and you know, obviously there still are Marvel movies coming out, but with less of them, it just feels like theaters are less important than they've ever been. So, you know, I don't know that, certainly Inside Out 2 is not going to change that. And like, it sounds like with how the Marvels is doing, it's not going to change that. It's just, I don't know how and when we come out of it. But that's a bigger and broader point for another time. Inside Out 2 comes out June 14th, 2024. So this is on the summer movie schedule. Again, probably not going to see it in theaters. This might be a drive-in movie, though. This is one I would go to the drive-in to see. If only because it'll be peak drive-in season.
That's what we saw the first one, is at the drive-in.
I also saw the first one at a drive-in, incidentally. So maybe I just need to try and recreate the experience to whatever extent possible. Anyways, we're going to come back in just a moment to talk through a live-action Legend of Zelda. We'll get to that. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I did not shout out our fantastic Patreon producer, Mr. Stephen Keller. Stephen's been supporting us for a while on the show. As a result, he gets this producer shout out every week. He gets input into the weekly game segment, which once again this week is not being hosted by me because I lose always. He's also getting access, of course, to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and he gets the occasional guest spot on the show. Stephen gets all of these things as a night level subscriber on our Patreon. That's the highest of our 3 levels of subscriber support. There's also a Squire level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog, and a page level, which gets you access to the monthly secret segment. For all the details on any and all of those levels of support, you can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Say hi to us. Say hi to Stephen. It's also a good time for me to shout out our Twitter handles. We have @OW86, that's me, of course. We have @OW Nerdbomber, @OW Techtic, and our main show account @OnlineWarriors1. Reach out to us there with any questions about our Patreon system, and also with any questions or comments about what you've heard on this show, either this episode or any past episode. We're happy to have conversations with all of you about, whatever. So again, thanks to Stephen for his support. We'll take a short break now and come back to talk about The Legend of Zelda.
Welcome aboard Too Vague Airlines. We're cruising here at 40,000 feet. That might be too many feet, but what do I know? I'm not really an airplane. I'm a podcaster. Actually, I'm a co-podcaster. I'm the co-host of several episodes of the Too Vague podcast. If you haven't heard it, you're missing out. Check out the Too Vague podcast. Any place podcasts do whatever they do.
Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign. For your continued safety, Too Vague Airlines requires that you keep your seatbelt fastened at all times while seated. But while you're seated, you can tune into the Too Vague podcast, TWOVAGUE, on your favorite podcast services and enjoy the flight.
All right, so as a segue into this topic, I read online recently that the Hollywood winds are blowing in the direction of video game movies replacing the MCU as like the current cinematic juggernaut. First of all, do you guys agree with that? Do you think that's a likely outcome? I mean, we've had, Mario obviously was an enormous deal. Do you think it's a harbinger of like what's to come? Because I don't know that I do.
I do think we're going to see more video game adaptations. I don't think it's fair to call them like the next MCU juggernaut, because the cool thing about dipping into these video game properties is that they're not connected. Every different video game property can kind of stand on its own. Like, yeah, maybe you'll get exhausted of video game property adaptations in general, but all of the different adaptations that we've seen so far vary so drastically in terms of their tone and genre. Like, somebody who is super into The Last of Us, like who never played video games, you could just get a zombie fanatic who never played the game and is like, oh, this is a zombie show. Cool, I'm in. And somebody who is watching a Zelda adaptation could be somebody who's into high fantasy. Like, you don't need to have video game background. You don't need to know the backstory. And the nice thing too about it is that because there haven't been that many video game adaptations, all of these IPs are going to be good jumping in points for people who aren't familiar with them.
I agree. That's the beauty of this medium is I guarantee you there will be a slew of movies coming out based on video games that a slew of people will not even realize that there was a video game version of that ever existed.
You're talking about, obviously Mario, you mentioned The Last of Us. We had Sonic, and Sonic got a second movie, I believe, if I recall.
Yep.
Yeah.
We also had Uncharted, and I believe Uncharted 2 is on the books. It's obviously not out yet, but I do think that's happening based on what I can remember. So there's definitely an uptick, and now we're hearing about The Legend of Zelda. We've also had I don't know if you count Detective Pikachu. I guess you probably would, but that was another one that semi-recently came out. It's definitely a trend. I agree that it's not, it's hard to compare it to the MCU in that it's not setting up a universe. It just, from a dollars and cents perspective, it seems like studios are banking on this being quote unquote the next big thing. I do think The Legend of Zelda, I think there's a couple categories here. I think what you said about The Last of Us is definitely correct. And I think you could also say the same thing about Uncharted in the sense that you might just want to see a movie about treasure hunting. You might just want to see a show about zombies, and those would fit the bill, and you could just go on not knowing that the video games even existed, right? With Mario, I would also say with Sonic, that's not as much the case.
But if you're a kid, you might be like, oh, look at this colorful cartoon character. I've never played the game. I have no idea what the game even is, but I like Sonic and I like Mario because they're cute.
Yeah.
Certainly possible. I think The Legend of Zelda definitely fits into, if those two categories do exist, like, I think it fits into the Last of Us Uncharted category of, like, this could just be a high fantasy thing, right? So I do think it's a very smart idea. It's an idea I should have seen this coming. This seems very, very straightforward, especially, again, considering the success Nintendo had with Super Mario. Like, this is going to happen. The obvious next question is, do you see it being as financially successful as Mario? Because I do think Mario's audience, kind of going back to what you were just saying, like, I think Mario's audience skews younger, and I think that brings in more money for Mario. I don't know that Legend of Zelda is as successful, but also it kind of comes down to a question of which franchise is a bigger deal.
Legends of Zelda, I kind of see where you're going with this. It does pull a more older crowd. It is, in my opinion, more successful than the Mario franchise. But again, that's my opinion of where it's not more successful. Obviously, the Mario franchise is more successful because Mario. The problem with these comparisons is Mario kind of has a diverse portfolio. They've really made sure to like put Mario in just about freaking everything.
He's more pervasive, right?
Whereas when a new Zelda drops, it fucking drops. You know what I'm saying?
I think I agree with Illeagle here, though. Like, Mario, there have been a slew of Mario games that just dropped. Like, Super Mario Wonder just came out, and didn't that break some ridiculous record? Like, I think Zelda is extremely popular, don't get me wrong, but I think to Illeagle's point, Mario has that inherent, like, kids will want to see a Mario movie. Even if they don't play the games, adults will want to see a Mario movie. Whereas when you're talking about Zelda, you've kind of, unless you really skew it childishly, you're not going to pull in that kid movie theater goer.
Yeah.
And I think and here's the other thing though. I think that's the key to the movie being successful, is not trying to pull in that kid audience.
Oh, for sure. But I just don't think it's going to be as big of a moneymaker. Like, I think it's going to pull in a bunch of cash, but I don't think it's going to reach the heights of Mario.
Yeah, it's going to be successful for them. And also, we should go back to the fact that this is going to be live action. So, like, it doesn't, even if it were animated, the Legend of Zelda characters like Link versus Mario, Link does not have the cuteness factor that like Mario has or Toad has or various other characters
depends which outfit
has. Well, okay, let's agree to disagree. But like, live action obviously is trying to take things in a different direction. They are not trying to be cute. For all I know, they're going to be trying to take themselves very seriously, which, I think could definitely work. I'm very curious to see the vision. Like, we've seen live action high fantasy. We've seen a number of things kind of flop recently. Like, the Wheel of Time came out, and I think that kind of just didn't work.
So I've given this a lot of thought on what elements of the franchise they need to leverage in order to be successful. So one thing that I want to mention about Link is he is the silent type. In all of the stories, he's almost never talking, and Zelda is like tapping into him and like communicating, I guess, telepathically in various ways, and she's sort of this guiding light. And the other side of it is like not so much what Link's doing that makes the story so good, but really the lore of Hyrule. And so the two things that I think they need to do to be successful is they need to tap into that lore and the backstory behind everything. There's a lot of calamity. Those who've played the stories, they drop the word calamity like it's in every other goddamn sentence. The other side of it is they need to maintain that stoic, silent type. He just needs to be the quiet, get the job done person. And that's it. Don't make it cute.
Would that stick in a live action movie though? Can you have a protagonist who really doesn't speak all that much?
Master Chief.
And then look in the adaptation.
Drive. I like Drive as a better example.
Yeah, but that entire movie was more or less like it was music based.
And the whole time though, and that's where it goes back into the
No, you're thinking of Baby Driver. Drive is a different movie.
That's where it goes back to the way in which they they push him through the story. It's where he was the getaway driver.
He's the one. Well, no, that's Baby Driver. Drive is Ryan Gosling. It's Gosling. Yeah. This was like way back. Like, admittedly, this was like over 10 years ago that movie came out. But like, that's the one thing I remember about that movie is that he like doesn't talk, and like he's the main character, and like all sorts of stuff happens to him. I do think it's possible. I think it's very challenging. I don't disagree with you, Techtic, that it's a good idea and a good direction, but I think it's very, very hard to execute.
The key way to do it would be to have that constant voice of Zelda in his ear. That's what I mean, and I know the Master Chief adaptation was a bust, but the reason why the Master Chief adaptation worked is because he had Cortana in his ear, and they didn't execute Cortana well in the live action Halo. And so if they do this,
they also completely changed Master Chief's character.
That's that, and we go back to everything we ever talk ever, the Avatar. Just stay faithful to what works, and you will have a success.
Okay, so now on a more fun note, I know there's a lot more characters in the Zelda franchise, but if you could fan cast your Link and Zelda, who would you choose?
Ryan Gosling is at the height of his power.
He's too old. I mean, Link is like ostensibly a boy, right? Or does it depend on what they do?
I think he's a boy.
Yeah.
Zelda's a girl.
No, sure. I mean, like age-wise. Boy, that's a really good question.
Before we get into this, I do want to make one comment about them staying true. It is important to note that Nintendo is investing their own money into this project, and so they have a vested interest to make sure that it stays true to the fan base. So I think that is very important to mention.
Jacob Tremblay, final answer on Link. 17 years old. He's the exact correct age, in my opinion. Zelda, I got no idea.
He does have a good Linkish face. I could see that.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. I googled him to make.
I was waiting for you to say look. Just to piss Nerdbomber off. Timothy Chalamet.
No, Timothy Chalamet would not work. His gangliness is too. He's got too much gangles.
I know Tom Holland is like a very common fan cast for Link, and I don't think that. Like, I don't think
so.
He could pull it off for sure, but I don't think it would be a stoic character. Then it would be like a funnier adaptation. Not saying that Tom Holland can't play stoic characters, because he can, but I just don't think that would carry through if he played Link.
Well, also I think Tom Holland, he's kind of gotten his flowers elsewhere, and he's got too much recognition. Like Jacob Tremblay, we know he has the chops because of things like Room, and he was in The Little Mermaid, but like people don't look at him and immediately know who he is, and I think that's a good thing. Like, I think that's what this needs. So
yeah, I was gonna say like Anya Taylor-Joy could be a good Zelda, but she has too recognizable of a character, and she's already in the Mario universe. So like,
yeah, but again, that's animated. I think that might work. I think that's a reasonable pick for Zelda. I don't know what the popular fan casts are. Like you said, I'm not sure, but
or Kiernan Shipka maybe if you want to. Although, how old is she? She skews younger, right?
What I wonder is, what's the thing that the little thing says when, like, is this the hey listen thing? Hey listen, is that Zelda? Where the thing talks to you and it's really annoying and people complain about it all the time? Or am I thinking of a different franchise?
I don't recall what you're referring to.
Hey listen. It's Navi. When Navi talks to you in Zelda, they always say hey listen, and it annoys the crap out of people. Like, I'm trying to think of things they can do that are like do you think they're going to do like cheeky in-jokes? Because, like, if they want, like, Mario obviously did that whatever, at any opportunity it could, based on what I've heard. I haven't seen the movie. But Mario was a different environment. It was going for a different tone. If this tries to go serious, they have less opportunity to do that. And I'm not necessarily saying they have to try to do that, but I guess that's what I'm thinking about right now is, can they have their cake and eat it too? Do they want to get referential and cheeky in a quote-unquote more serious environment, and especially in a live-action environment? I don't know what the answer to that is.
So one of the other points, I can't remember if we mentioned this already, but Sony is also, what are they producing and distributing this movie as well? And I'm trying to think of what Sony has done with their video game adaptations, and I feel like a lot of them have been cheekier.
Well,
right?
Uncharted was certainly one of them. Uncharted, I don't know that Uncharted was cheeky, because Uncharted was like trying to kind of change a lot. Like they made Nathan Drake super young. Like the one little in-joke they pulled was Sully with the mustache at the end, which, spoiler alert, but also it's like the big who cares point. So I don't know that they had an opportunity to go in-jokey with anything, and they didn't take it. They didn't want to take it. I wonder if things go a similar way with Legend of Zelda, or if, there's so much to draw on, right? So if they wanted to make in-jokes and do that kind of thing, get very referential, they certainly can. I don't know what else Sony has done video game wise besides Uncharted, but I'm sure I'm missing something.
Help me. What was the racing show that we just watched on Peacock?
Oh, Twisted Metal.
Yeah. Like that was very irreverent comedy, I guess.
But yeah, that was what they were going for, right? It was like this very irreverence, the perfect word. They didn't want to be taken seriously at all.
My only ask with this is don't cast Jason Momoa as Ganon. That's like my only
ask is don't cast Chris Pratt. The man is everywhere. No, thank you.
Those are both reasonable asks. We'll have to see. I think Ganondorf, again, I don't have any Legend of Zelda experience, but that seems like another opportunity for Jim Carrey to really do some stuff. But like, I don't know. Jim Carrey is not serious. Like if they want to go serious, they can't have him. I just like could picture Jim Carrey as Ganondorf, I guess is my point. Anyways, yeah, this has no release date. This is like super, super early. They basically just announced that they're doing it, and that's all the information we have besides like who's producing it, who's paying for it, which we've also already talked about. So be on the lookout for more Legend of Zelda live action details in the coming months. That brings us to What Are You Up To Wednesday. It's the part of the show where we talk about what we've been up to. And I know I went first last week, so this week I'm going to not go first. And I'm going to instead have Nerdbomber go first because chivalry is not dead. So Nerdbomber, over to you.
So still playing Starfield, still in the thick of it. Don't really have a whole lot new to report there, just pretty much in the thick of it, still going through it. We did watch a movie though last night called Theater Camp. And if you're not familiar with this is on Hulu. And the premise is that there's a theater camp in the Adirondacks, and the founder goes into a coma. So her son, who is kind of like a finance pro vlogger guy and doesn't really understand theater or anything about the summer camp, takes it over, and they're in dire financial straits. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. It was very funny. Bring back the word irreverent. It was kind of like they said it was like filmed documentary style, but it wasn't really. And I don't know. It was very good. I don't want to give too much away. Not that there's a whole lot to give away, but, I don't want to give away like any of the joke or funny haha moments. But if you're interested in, theater, acting, funny stuff at all, I would give it a shot.
Cool. Are you passing the baton?
Yes, I am.
I will take the baton from you, and I will mention a movie that my wife and I watched 2 nights ago, I believe it was. Kind of scrolling Netflix, one of those situations where we had put it on our Netflix watch list because it looked interesting. We probably put it on the watch list like a couple months ago and finally got around to watching it. A movie called, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly, Vivarium. Vivarium, like aquarium, but with Viva at the front. This is a movie starring Jesse Eisenberg, Imogen Poots, basically no one else. It came out in 2019. It's been on Netflix for quite a while. It is a horror mystery. Now, Nerdbomber, let me just say, it's not overtly scary. It's one of those horror movies where like it's characters get put. Here's what happens. They meet up with a real estate. They're a young couple looking for a house. They meet up with a real estate agent who says, let's go look at this house in this neighborhood. They drive to the neighborhood. They follow the real estate agent, and they enter this neighborhood where all the houses look exactly the same. It's like dystopian suburbia. Like they're all like these greenhouses that are all the exact same layout. They drive to a house called Number 9. Long story short, the real estate agent leaves them there. They try to leave the neighborhood, and they can't get out for cosmic reasons. They can't escape the neighborhood, so they're stuck in the house. And long story short, they get stuck raising a child. I don't want to get into more details than that. But basically, there aren't really jump scares. It's not what this movie is about. It's more so cinema of the unsettling. It was very good. This is one of those hidden gems.
What part of it is the unsettling part? They had to raise a child. Ah!
Well, without getting into the details, the child is weird. It's not their child. And also they're basically prisoners in this like housing development. I don't want to give anything away. There are a couple good things about it. It's very well rated on Rotten Tomatoes. It's also a movie that I would argue is an indie movie. So like people don't really know about it. It's kind of a hidden gem. It's an hour and 37 minutes long. And people who listen to the show on a regular basis know that I love movies that are less than 2 hours, and we need more movies that are less than 2 hours. This is no exception to that. So I think you could do far worse. I wish I had watched it around spooky season. Like it felt a little weird watching it when spooky season was over, but it was definitely enjoyable. So wanted to shout that out. And then I also wanted to say, because I don't think I had finished last week, I finished Alan Wake. Yeah, I'm going to play Alan Wake too. There's a 100% chance of that. It's just a matter of when. The story, I will say, I didn't love the ending of Alan Wake 1. The story was decent. The gameplay was good. As repetitive as the combat was always satisfying. That never changed. I'm a big fan of finding collectible items, kind of just to find them as like a task. And this game really drives that point home. I thought that was great. So I liked Alan Wake Remastered, especially if you can get it for like $10. It's definitely worth your time. I've already mentioned on previous episodes that like the quality of the remaster is not the best, but if you're not paying too much for it, you probably won't care. It's basically a playable movie. Just enjoy it for what it is. And yeah, I'm moving on now. I did install God of War on my PS5, but I have not yet started it.
Oh boy,
I just wanted to
it's happening.
let you know that it's impending. So more updates to come.
I'm so excited
on that. So yeah, that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Techtic to finish us out here.
So I have a game recommendation for you if you haven't started one yet.
Stop it.
It's Spider-Man 2.
Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth.
I'm shut your mouth. I'm not going to be playing Spider-Man 2 because I'm not going to be paying the like $70 for it quite yet.
Guys.
But, I mean, obviously I'm going to be playing Spider-Man 2. I just haven't yet.
I finished it and it was amazing. It was the best Spider-Man story that they've made thus far. I literally, I keep calling back to this one scene where I was stuck with my mouth fully agape. It was pulls you in, drops your pants down, and like, whew, takes you for a ride. My goodness, was this good.
I really don't like that turn of phrase. That was horrifying.
It was really good. So after I finished Spider-Man, I then moved to start playing Metroid Prime on the Switch. I started it on docked mode, and I don't remember. I've always said that Metroid should be a side scroller, and I played this when I was younger, and I don't remember not liking the first person view, like not having a problem with it. And it just, I don't know if it's because it's on the small screen and it needs to be docked, or if I just am no longer a first person shooter kind of person. I mean, most shooting games I play, I do opt for the third party view. So I do have to figure that out. But right now it's sort of a continuing to collect data and really TBD. And still, as I said, Metroid should and always will be the best played as a side scroller. Nothing has tweaked that opinion.
We should just agree to disagree on that point. But let me ask you this as a follow-up question. What would you say is the last first-person shooter you played in first-person mode? Please processing. It's been a long time is what I'm hearing. If you don't have an answer.
I'd probably like a Call of Duty, honestly.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I don't go in for them a whole lot anymore myself. I think the last one because Returnal was third person, Callisto Protocol was third person, Dead Space was
even
third person.
Borderlands I play as third person.
It's funny. I'm playing Starfield, and it started me in third person, and I was like, nope, first person I go.
It's just a matter of preference. I mean, I think
it's interesting to see how people prefer different things. I find that so interesting. There's got to be some kind of like study as to like why your preferences are the way that they are. I feel like it's just a super interesting like psychological thing.
Guys, let me tell you
that
something.
I don't have answers to, but I'm interested in.
There was a point where Nerdbomber wanted to do a spin-off video series of her studying a topic for a week and then presenting her findings on it.
Specifically like
this
science.
This could be topic one.
Like I was interested in doing like, I don't know, scientific studies behind video games. It was like, but there's already a guy who does that. It was like explaining papers in like 10 minutes or whatever the heck. There's a guy who does that already. Like that ship has sailed.
There's a lot of video essays about video games online too that you can find that are, a lot of them are very high quality. Kind of talking about things like that, like why do some people prefer first person? Like the last first person game, like I believe I picked up, oh gosh, what's the one that's like funky themed and it's by the Dishonored people? Oh my gosh, what is it called? The one where you replay the same day over and over again. Why can't I think of what it's called?
Oh, Deathloop?
Deathloop, thank you. That was the last first-person shooter that I played, and I didn't play it for very long, and I wound up putting it down. For me, I think first-person shooters probably peaked at Destiny. Destiny was still probably the most into a first-person shooter I've been. It's either that or like the Call of Duty campaigns back when they were actually good. That's another thing that, as of this recording, I think Modern Warfare 3 just came out, and all I've heard about it is that the campaign is awful and that the game was rushed to delivery and blah, blah, blah. It's another topic in and of itself.
I want minimal stuff on my heads-up display. That's it. Too much
It's an interesting
stuff.
point of feedback.
I really do think it's like a distractions thing for me. Too many things on the display. I need to zoom out and like focus. But anyway,
I will say I think for me, again, thinking about the games I tend to like, I mean, Last of Us is another example. Like the games I've liked the most have all been third person. So maybe there's something to be said about like I've never been a big FPS guy, but like maybe I'm just not one at all. Maybe that's more important to me when it comes to whether I like a game or not than I've come to realize. So, anyways, I appreciate that food for thought, Techtic. Any other updates for us?
No, that's it for now.
Beauty. Well, that brings us to my favorite time of the week. It's the time where I further dig the hole that I'm digging for myself in Quiztown. I'm going to just say, too, I believe I did forget to write. I still have to go back and fix it, but I was listening to previous episodes. I think I did miss a week here somewhere. I don't think it matters a whole lot, but Nerdbomber is 12-10 per my records. Techtic is 11-10. I'm 9-16. Steven 3-1. So it just keeps getting worse and worse for me. I mean, given that there's no prize for the winner, I mean, you guys are obviously putting
I will say it is really interesting, like the way that
so
this season
that much
started.
is cemented.
I remember I went on a skid. Like, I don't think I won for almost like 2 months, but then things can change very quickly. You never know.
I picked up 9 wins like somewhere here. I'm assuming it was in the early part of the year. I was winning a lot, and then I just started losing constantly. Like,
Maybe
I think I
this is
posted a
gonna be your
quiz
day.
once
Who
in the
knows?
past like 3 months. So it's very possible. Why don't you let me know what my chances are?
All right, so this week's quiz is all about a plant family called the Marantaceae family of plants. Marantaceae. I had to look up how to pronounce that.
What is a Marantaceae?
So it is a family of plants that has a lot of species within it. That's actually our first question. And Techtic, you'll go first. How many species of plants are in the Marantaceae family?
Can you give an example of what a Marantaceae is?
We'll talk about this a little bit later, but like arrowroot, there's a lot of like house plants. I wouldn't call them succulents per se, but like very hardy house plants that people have there.
It's like a desert plant?
No, it is a tropical plant, more of a tropical plant.
I'm going to say 4,000.
This is exactly the kind of quiz. This is exactly the kind of quiz that I can win, because it just seems like neither Techtic or I know anything about what you're even talking about. You said 4,000. I mean, I like where your head's at, because it is probable that she asked this question because it's a crazy number. But I'm gonna undercut you. I'm not gonna use my 1. I'm gonna say 50.
That was well played. There are 530 species of plants in the Marantaceae family.
Obviously, Techtic. I mean, come on. Do you even know your Marantaceae? Did I pronounce it right?
So, like,
it felt weird even saying it.
There's arrowroot. There's like water cannas.
You keep saying arrowroot like I know what
okay,
that is.
well,
I have no idea what that is.
Google some pictures. After this, Google some pictures.
Yeah.
You'll see what it is. I think
It sounds like I need more
think we
plants
do.
in my house. That's what I'm hearing.
All right, so as I mentioned, these are tropical plants. They're found in the American tropics, the Asian tropics, the African tropics. What percentage of these plants are found in the American tropics?
Yeah, this is again just kind of tossing a number out there. I'm gonna say it's low. I'm gonna say lucky number 13, baby. 13%.
I'm going to say it's 20%.
All right, we got a tie game here. 80%, or the majority, of Marantaceae plants are found in the American tropics.
Yeah, but I'm American. I've never heard of this word one time.
Well, not necessarily like the United States of America. There's South America, all that jazz. America, there's multiple Americas.
Oh, you got bamboozled.
I accept the outcome. I don't know. I still don't even know what these plants are, so I'm not feeling that bad about not knowing that thing. So let's continue.
All right, the hardy water canna is one of the plants in the Marantaceae family that thrives in water gardens, swamps, marshes, and ponds. What is its average maximum growth height in inches?
Yeah, the classic water canna.
Canna.
Man. Yeah,
Water canna.
Its maximum height in inches.
In inches.
This is 7 inches.
It's got to be more than that. I mean, my guess is it's in swamps, but like I'm guessing most of it is actually underwater, and you only see a little bit, like an iceberg. I'm just gonna double it and say 14 inches.
All right, so Illeagle's back in the lead. They can grow up to 4 feet on average, or
Why use
48
inches
inches. Well,
To trick us.
48
It was
gives
mission
us more
accomplished.
nuance.
Sweet. That rules for me. That puts me in a good spot.
All right, so now we're talking about the arrowroot. So the arrowroot, to get a little bit more, I've learned a lot about this plant species in the past few hours as I was putting this together. So you can actually eat a lot of the roots of these family of plants. They were actually harvested all around the world. You can eat the tubers, all that kind of jazz, big harvesting plant in certain areas of the world. And arrowroot is a type of Marantaceae plant that is starchy and can actually be used to make flour. What percentage of arrowroot flour is protein?
What percentage of arrowroot flour? Well, of course I know a lot about arrowroot to begin with, so this should be pretty easy.
Well, you're learning today.
What percentage of arrowroot flour is protein? It's going to be extremely high because that's the point. 85%.
3%.
All right, we're back to a tie game. It has 7.7% makeup of protein, and it is actually one of the higher carb flours and starches that you can find. So it's very high in carbohydrates and not good at diversifying the old dietary needs. So because it's tie game, this fifth question effectively serves as our tiebreaker. I don't think, has anybody used our +1 yet? It's still
Nope.
fair game.
He's in a good position right now.
All right, so the Marantaceae family of plants was named after Bartolomeo. I pronounced that terribly, but I'm trying to be Italian. Bartolomeo Mio. I don't know,
really
Maranta.
I'm having a great time. Yeah.
He was an Italian physician and botanist. Sorry, the meow got me. And botanist of the 16th century who is known for his contributions to plant taxonomy. In what year did he die?
Can you repeat the question? There's a lot of giggles. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
The Italian,
just don't say the name.
The Italian physician and botanist after which this family of plants was named was very well known in the 16th century for his contributions to plant taxonomy. In what year did he die? I can give you a little bit of
1652.
Okay, well, she said the 16th century, which is the 1500s. So
that
I feel
was
like you
the
have
hint
to
to
have
kind
busted.
of give you a bound.
I mean, he said it already, so I'm just gonna go to Jesus times. I'm just gonna use my 1 and just say 0 AD or whatever.
And Illeagle takes it. He died in 1571.
Bro, who makes these numbers? 16th century and 1500? Come on, this is like
Yeah.
daylight savings time.
Because we're in the
bullshit.
21st century right
Spring ahead.
That's how centuries work. I feel like I won on a technicality, which the technicality being Techtic not understanding centuries, but I will absolutely take the W to move to 10 and 16.
I'm also going to drop, I want to live react here. I'm going to drop a picture of this plant. It's a very common house plant, this species, in the chat. And I would just like you guys to, take a gander and be like, oh, I kind of do know what that is.
I mean, it looks like a plant I've probably seen before, but
I've never seen that before in my life.
It's got round leaves with stripes.
Oh, it's a plant with leaves.
It's a standard
okay.
house plant sort of deal.
I'm not like overcome with recognition. Let me put it that way. Sure, it looks like a plant that I've probably seen before and not really even acknowledged. But now I know what the protein content of the flower is, so that's fine.
And by flower, I mean like FLOUR, not like the edible. Like it's not like a leaf flower. I don't know.
I'll take the W. And I want to thank you for attempting to educate Techtic and I on herbology, I guess is what you would call this. So thank you. That does it for this episode of the Online Warriors podcast. We hope you had a good time hanging out with us, talking all things pop culture and what was it called? Marantaceae? Marantaceae. I hope you learned something. I know I did. We encourage you to head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review there if you liked the show, or if you didn't. Hit us up on Twitter at the handles we already mentioned, and consider going over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Online Warriors Podcast, giving back to the show that you have been listening to and hopefully have enjoyed. We'll let you go now. Have a great week. Stay safe and keep on podcasting.